Miss Tara here. Welcome back for another week of GC Kids at Home. So I know that you guys are probably going a little crazy staying inside so much, but it's what we have to do to keep safe from all the germs going around. So just take a deep breath. Get your wiggles out if you have to. Alright, I'm so excited to be able to do another lesson with you, even though we can't meet in class. But I'm going to start with prayer. Are you ready? Alright, fold your hands, close your eyes, bow your heads. Dear God, I thank you so much for all of the kids at Gospel Center and the kids that are watching this video. Lord, I pray that you help us to learn more about you and your word. And God, I pray that you help these kids to know that you are always with them. And no matter what happens, God, you've got them. And Lord, I also pray that you teach them that they can pray like the adults, they can worship like the adults, and God, they can share your word just like adults can. We love you, Lord, and we thank you that you have given us the ability to do videos, even when we can't meet in person. Amen. All right, so today we are going to be talking about Moses. So to get us started, I had a little help from my son Rowan, and he is going to tell you what he knows about the story of Moses. Here you go.
Moses said, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh said, "No." God sent 10 plagues.
10 plagues?
Yeah, 10 plagues.
Do you remember any of the plagues?
Yeah.
What are they?
He set frogs all over and grasshoppers.
Yeah, do you remember anything else?
Yeah, and people put, and he made a river of blood. People put blood from the river all over people's doors, and he was scared, so he said go. And they went, and they were happily ever after, but they didn't know where to stay. They went out of Egypt.
How did the Israelites know that they were going to be okay?
Well, because Pharaoh said they have to go out of Egypt.
Yeah. Were they alone? Were the Israelites alone?
No. They had God with them.
Hey friends, I'm going to be reading today's Bible story out of the Jesus Storybook Bible. The passage is found in Exodus 3 through 13. God to the rescue. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died, but their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule, but this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph and didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves, and he beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves, they weren't burning up. So he took a closer look. "Moses," boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to him. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears. I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free." Moses was afraid, but God said, "I will be with you." So Moses went to Pharaoh. "Pharaoh," began Moses, God says said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to, won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water, but still, Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. In your bed, frogs. In your hair, frogs. In your soup, frogs. All over, everywhere, frogs. "Make them go away," Pharaoh screamed. Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. But still, Pharaoh said, "No." So then God sent swarms of flies, flies buzzing in your eyes, flies. And after that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts. Then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation, and everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make it stop and I'll let them go." And each time God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "Actually, no, you can't go." Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God or he will have to send the worst thing of all." Pharaoh just laughed. "Ha ha ha." So God said, "The oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe." God told his people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and to put some of its blood on their front doors. "When God passes over your house," Moses explained, "God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you." That night it was just as God had said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the chariots of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. "Ah!" Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. "Get out!" Pharaoh shouted. "Just go!" And so, that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever. God makes a way. Exodus 14 through 15. Moses and God's people escaped out of Egypt and into the wilderness. They didn't know the way, but God knew the way, and he would show them. "I will bring you to a new home, a special land," God promised them. "I will look after you. I am with you." God sent a big cloud for them to follow, a pillar of smoke stretching up to the sky. It moved in front of them as they walked and shaded them from the blazing heat of the day. And when it was time to rest, it stopped. All through the cold desert nights, it kept them warm, glowing like fire. God led his people through the desert to the edge of a great sea. They were just wondering how to cross it when suddenly they heard a terrible thundering and pounding. It sounded almost like horses' hooves. They shaded their eyes to look back, and they screamed. It was! Pharaoh and his army were coming to get them. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. Get my slaves back! He screeched and charged out into the desert after them, with 600 of his fastest horsemen, and every single chariot in Egypt. What were God's people going to do? In front of them was a big sea. It was so big, there was no way around it. But there was no way through it. It was too deep. They didn't have any boats, so they couldn't sail across. And they couldn't swim across because it was too far and they would drown. And they couldn't turn back because Pharaoh was chasing them. They could see the flashing swords now, glinting in the baking sun, and the dust clouds and chariots after scary chariot surging towards them. So they did the only thing there was left to do. Panic! We're going to die, they shrieked. Don't be afraid, Moses said. But there's nothing we could do, they screamed. God knows you can't do anything, Moses said. God will do it for you. Trust him and watch. But there's no way out, they cried. God will make a way, Moses said. Another minute and it would have been over. But then the strangest thing happened. God made the pillar of smoke move. It moved behind his people and hid them from the Egyptians. Then God sent a strong east wind to blow all night long. It blew on the water of the big sea. It blew it to the left and it blew it to the right until it blew it into two towering walls of water. And there, right through the middle of the sea, a muddy pathway opened up, and God's people walked across the dry land. When the Egyptians tried to follow, the walls of water crashed back down on them and swallowed them up. God's people were safe. They danced and laughed and sang and thanked God. When there had been no way out, God had made a way. Many years later, once again, God was going to make a way where there was no way. From the beginning, God's children had been running from him and hiding. God knew his children could never be happy without him. But they couldn't get back to him by themselves. They were lost. They didn't know the way back, but God knew the way. And one day, he would show them. Wow. What did you guys think about that story? I'll tell you what I thought. God did so much. But if you really look at the story, think about the Israelites. They went through so many bad things. Bad things were happening all over them and all around them. There were frogs everywhere. There were flies everywhere. They were getting beaten. They were slaves. And life was hard. But God had a plan, and he was going to rescue them. And God had to use the frogs and use the flies and use the sickness so that he could save them. And he did. One thing that we said many times in that story, and I'm going to point it out, is God said, I will be with you. I'm going to read you a devotional on that thought. Here we go. Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading out of the book, The Plans I Have for You devotional by Amy Parker. So I'm going to read you one that's called, I Will Be With You. So we've all heard the story of Moses standing tall by the Red Sea, stretching his staff across the brewing waters just before they went shooting into the sky. Then Moses miraculously led hundreds of thousands of Israelites straight through the middle of the sea, on dry land, until they were safe on the other side. It's a pretty heroic story, right? But have you heard the one about Moses, the chicken? No. Well, let's get back in time a bit. Let's go back before Moses and the Red Sea. before the 10 plagues on the Egyptians, and all the way back to when Moses tended the flocks for his father-in-law, Jethro. Moses had just led the flock into the edge of the wilderness when he saw a bush burning on the mountain. As he watched, he noticed something odd. A bush wasn't burning up. So he went to get a closer look. As Moses got closer, the bush called out to him, "Moses, Moses!" And what did Moses do? He answered the bush, "I'm here." Then Moses learned he wasn't talking to a bush at all. He was talking to God. "Moses, my people are miserable in Egypt. I'm sending you to lead them out of there." And that's when Moses turned chicken. "Wait a minute, God. Why do you want to send me? Who am I to lead the Israelites?" The last time Moses was in Egypt, he had been running for his life. And now God wanted to send him back there. God's answer was simple. "I will be with you." Moses didn't grasp the hugeness of God's statement, but who do I tell them you are? And what if they don't believe me? What if they don't even listen to me? So God gave Moses the power to perform miraculous signs so the Israelites would believe that God had sent Moses to them. But God, even with that, you see, I've never been much of a public speaker. I speak slowly. I murmur. Who created the human mouth? Who makes people hear? Who gives them sight? It is me, and I will be with you. Pardon me, God, but, you see, would you please just send someone else? Okay, Moses, your brother Aaron will help you. He's already on his way here. I will be with both of you. I'll tell you what to say. I'll teach you what to do. I will be with you. And you know what? God was. He was with Moses and Aaron the first, second, and all the way through the 10th time they approached Pharaoh. God was with Moses and Aaron and all of the Israelites when the frogs, flies, and locusts swept across the land of Egypt. And God was right there with Moses as he stood tall, stretched out his hand, and parted the Red Sea for God's people to cross over to safety. What excuses do you make to God? No excuse can stand in the way of the plans that God has for you. Just remember, Exodus 3:12, He will be with you. So one thing that I heard throughout the story in the devotional is, I will be with you. God is with us all the time, and He's got us. No matter what we go through, no matter what others go through, God's got it. He's there. And we have a hope that because we know about Jesus and we have Him in our hearts, we know that He's with us all the time. But not everybody knows about Jesus. So one thing I want you to do this week is I want you guys to take some time to pray. You could pray on your own or with your parents, and just ask God to show Himself to somebody you know that might not know Jesus. All right, I'm going to pray again. You ready? Let's fold our hands. Dear God, I thank you for these kids, and I thank you for your word, and that your word is true. Lord, I thank you that we have the ability to read your word and learn about it together, and that we know that you will always be with us. You'll be with us when we're scared. You'll be with us when times are bad. You'll be with us when times are good. And God, you are always there. And that we don't have to be afraid about stuff because we know you've got it. We love you, Lord, and we thank you for all you do. Amen. All right, guys. Well, I enjoyed having time with you this week. Remember that you can send me videos of you saying your Awana verses. You can send me pictures of you doing the coloring pages and the worksheets. And you can just give me a call with your parents' help and permission and let me know how your week is going. All right, till next time, bye.